Welcome to Half Grid. This year, for the first time, I made maple syrup, which I'm calling sandwich sauce, and it came out really good. And I thought I'd definitely make some mistakes, and which I probably did, but it really, really came out great. Started by trying to find a really good place to put some buckets, and I found that my whole yard is filled with red maples. So red maples here are all over the place. I could have tapped 50 trees probably. I put them all out. Put them on the north side. I mean on the south side, so they got lots of sun. It's very simple to do. We got some taps into the tree, and the taps came with these hoses, and I put them in 5 gallon food uh, uh, buckets, which were about it was about $10 a piece for those buckets, which was the first year investment. I think it's worth it. I ended up buying 10 of them overall. Um, you can see Ivan's running around enjoying. He enjoyed it as much as I did. At the end of the day, I ended up collecting about 25 gallons of sap, which was pretty much like water, and it was, it was great, nice and clean. I did a two boiler method where the left pot was used for actually making the syrup. The right pot was made for warming up the sap and getting it warm and condensing a little bit before I filtered it into the smaller pot. So basically, I did this all day. Every hour was probably about a half a gallon. I would take, the fresh sap, put it in the large pot. Then after a while, I would take it out and I would filter it into the smaller pot. And at this point, it is starting to turn into syrup, but now it's going into the pot where it's more condensed and really starting to refine. This took all day to do. It took probably 10 hours to do all of the boiling, another hour to do the finishing, and then another hour for canning and cleanup. What's important here is I really, really was careful to make sure I filtered everything. I filtered it from the from the sap buckets into the tall pot, and then I filtered it back from the tall pot into the smaller pot, trying to get all of the sap, the maple, they call it maple sand, which is minerals that are in the tree that come out with the sap. I don't think it's unhealthy for you, but I don't know for sure, and it settles at the bottom of the can anyways, but you're always going to get a little bit. For doing it this way, I'm pretty impressed with how clean it came out and how simple it really was. I used probably 1 bottle of propane for this whole project, so that lasted about 10 hours. Here I have another 15 gallons to go, and I've already finished 10.
To go.
And pretty much it's sitting around and just enjoying the day and watching the boil. And all day, just kind of slowly taking, you know, the sap out of the buckets, putting them in the big pot, transferring them to the small pot. It's a little tedious, but you're always watching to make sure that you're safe, nothing is going to catch fire, it's not too windy and blowing the flames around, and just making sure you're filtering everything as you go. And I have a beer or two as well. Spent a lot of time watching the dog that day, and the squirrels, and the wood pile. Ivan will stay out there by that wood pile all day long. He was exhausted the next day. I had to call him back once in a while just to make sure he stayed my companion and not some wild animal. But I think he enjoyed the day. While I was sitting there doing this, my wife basically did a lot of snowshoeing and enjoying the lake. Well, actually, I think this day was the first day of spring. So, um, great way to spend some time. It's very much watching these pots all day and making sure that they stay safe. It's important, very important, not to burn the sap. So as it starts to be condensed, you really want to watch it. Here you can see the sap is condensing down. It's like a auburn color. That's going to get very dark as we go forward. Had it at a rapid boil for a long time,
25
and I
gallons.
kind of speeded up the boil as
Eventually
we were
to
getting
this.
closer because it was getting dark and it was getting late and I was running out of time and energy. Eventually, you have to transfer to the house. And what's important about this is this is where people burn it or they ruin it. It has to be 7.5 degrees above the boiling point of water, which is 212 degrees. So I'm looking for about 219.5 degrees for this sap to be ready. So constantly kept checking the temperature, stayed right on top of it. I did not leave the stove. I tested it for that. This is how it looked. One good thing about filtering is you really get out all the foam and stuff. So this is really nice and clean. Here I'm looking at it. It's going to be about 213, and we're looking for 219 and a half. So very, very accurate. And I'm pretty pleased with the consistency and how it came up. It's not too thick, and when you warm the sap up and put it on pancakes, it's going to be amazing. The canning process, I filtered it only through cheesecloth. I didn't do another coffee filter. It would have taken too long to filter, and also I think I was pretty pleased with how much filtering I had already done. So it had already been filtered, if you think about it, you know, twice already. So it's through a coffee filter, so it's pretty good. Once I transferred to a bigger mason jar, these jars were all boiled and they were warm when I was pouring this in. And then you want to top it off, and because it acts like you're canning. So the jars are warm, your sap is warm, your sap's at 180 degrees at this point. You're putting it in there, you're topping it off, making sure there's not a lot of air. And when you put the covers on, they're going to be its equivalent to canning. And they say it'll last a long, long time like this. We'll probably go through this much sap syrup in probably a year and a half, and we're probably going to give half of it away. So fun to do. Michael Sherwood has actually been saying much the same since January, that he thinks the facts will ultimately support a charge of seditious conspiracy. And there are two ways to look.